You've got a lot of different things in here. How do you kind of decide what you're gonna put on display, crafting your studio space to all come together? How does that work?
For me, I like it to be like as intensely me as I can make it. When you're making art and you're wanting it to stand on its own as like a very unique thing, like the best way to do that is to like consult yourself, because you're the only one who can make the art that you can make. So I try and just overwhelm myself with like the things that I love, and especially things from like childhood too. So like Star Wars stuff is a big thing in here, and like, I don't know, I just want to make an enchanting atmosphere that is very like childlike, in that there's like a childlike sense of wonder that I'm just creating this. The artwork that I want to see in the world is the artwork that I'm trying to create. I've been an artist my whole life. Both my parents are artists, and I was homeschooled for the first part of my life, so drawing was actually like a big part of my upbringing. Like for early reading assignments, my mom would read to me, and we were required to illustrate what she was reading just to show that we were paying attention.
You've lived in California, Arizona, Utah, and you studied in Italy as well. Mm-hmm. How do you feel like maybe all of those landscapes or those cultures have affected your work and influenced it at all?
They've all influenced it a ton in many different ways. I think colors plays a huge role in my work, and definitely the colors of Arizona and Utah, like the red rocks and all of that, have really had like a warming influence on the color choices I make, lots of oranges and earth tones. In California, I lived maybe 10 minutes from the beach, and that was where I was born and grew up till I was 12, and so I went to the beach all the time. I think like there's much cooler air there, and the blues and greens. Typically, everything I make is just imaginary from memory of those places or things that really stood out to me, and I think I can access a lot of those different places I've lived and bring them into the art that I'm doing pretty easily. That's how my practice works for me. That's how I come up with imagery, is referencing past memories.
Yeah, that's super cool. So your art is described as never mild, and you use a lot of unusual color and a lot of textural depth. Can you kind of walk us through your creative process and maybe your unique artistic voice?
So I guess one thing I think that's important to know about like my artistic practice is that like right now I'm doing block printing and printmaking, but I change what I do very often. Well, every couple of years I change what I do. So prior to moving to Kalamazoo 3 years ago, I was doing oil painting pretty much exclusively for like 10 years. But within each medium, I've noticed that I always kind of come back around to like really wanting to focus on subtle color, like how color can like subtly create these different moods, and just the fascination of like the tactile quality of texture and that kind of thing. And I think my work, because of those things, like I use very expressive colors and leave a lot of the texture and sort of like letting you see the process in the final product.
So we watched during your demo you doing some block printing, carving, and you kind of described it as being an opposite effect where it stamps in the opposite direction. How does that kind of register in your brain when you're cutting that? Do you ever work with like words and then you have to do them backwards, you know?
Yeah, I don't often work with words. I don't have the greatest handwriting, and that's even worse when I'm trying to like carve out that handwriting. With block printing, like the image you're carving will turn out the reverse of what you want, so often I will draw something really like the drawing, and then I'll have to use tracing paper, trace it out, flip that tracing paper around, and then I'm basically reversing my drawing to reverse it, like do a reverse on the block. There's this whole back and forth, but when you peel the paper up from the press, it's always a surprise because you've been working for hours looking at a drawing or an like image that's one direction, and when you pull it up, there's like a surprise for you, the artist, which is really cool to have that experience with your own work. Printmaking is sort of it's a catch-all term for any art that you can basically reproduce an image multiple times, but in like a handmade way. You're basically carving a stamp, essentially, that you can then print as many times as you want, and each one is considered like a original artwork because you're hand carving the entire thing. And these tools that I'm using right now are called engraving tools. Isn't so much a knife as like cutting material out as pushing it out. So not like a U or V shape, it's basically a very sharp triangle essentially that's pushing material out. Here's a finished plate. Got all kinds of finished plates, and these are much smaller than I typically work. When I'm doing like a woodcut with the much larger chisels, I'll do something as large as this or even bigger. I think the biggest wood block that I've cut is 4 by 5 feet, which we printed with a steamroller. So I'm squeezing out some ink, and then I've got a brayer here, so this is how you apply the ink. So picking up some ink from up there, and then making a thin amount of it down here. Because you don't want to, like when you roll it up, you don't want to have like the big gloopy ink going into all the grooves, especially with the engraving tools. They carve really shallow. So you want to have a super thin layer of ink going onto the block. So roll out a really thin, even layer of ink, and then we'll see. This part's cool because you can see the image sort of emerge. It just looks sort of like a dirty block before, but you can see a little more clearly how the image is going to look. So yeah, this is an etching press. So how you print these, there's a lot of different ways to print them. Typically, like when people are doing this at home, they'll often use like just a wooden spoon. That's sort of where everyone starts, is just using a wooden spoon to burnish their image, which I did for a long time, and I still have it in case I need to get a little bit of pressure on one specific area. So I put the block down, then I've got my paper, which is a Japanese mulberry paper. It works really well for printmaking. So after I put the paper down, I put just a piece of scrap paper, and that just gives you a little bit more pressure. It's like creating a pressure sandwich. And then I cover that with a piece of acrylic, which in printmaking terms, you call it a tympan is the name for this, but it's basically just a thing to make sure the pressure is super even and holds everything in place. So then I start to roll it through, and I can feel it catches right there. So I'll take that off, and now I can peel back the print. So gives you a print of that, and you can see it reverses it because you're like placing it down on top of it, so you get a reverse image. But then I can turn around, take this print back to the desk, ink it up again, and reproduce that thing again and again and again. It's sort of like a much more democratic art in a way, because you can put a week's worth of effort into making this really nice, beautiful print, and rather than like if you had spent all that time doing a painting, like an oil painting, you might have to charge a few $1,000s. Whereas this, you can print it 30 times and divide that like few $1,000s by 30, and then more people can have the art at a more affordable price. So I really like that about it. You can share it with a much larger audience. So here's another block, inked and ready to go.
So you said you've been in Kalamazoo for 3 years now. How would you maybe describe the art scene here and what makes it unique or fun to be a part of?
I've lived many places, and Kalamazoo is the best art scene that I've ever been a part of. I think for many reasons, like there's a lot of funding here that is like easily accessible for just working artists. There's like the Caddy grant, as well as like a lot of opportunities. Like if you want to take classes at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts, they have scholarships that are available for people. Like it's really easy to get involved with the community without a lot of resources. And then people are just very supportive. Like places I've lived before, the art community can be very competitive and very like closed off and like a little standoffish. And in Kalamazoo, people are like, they find out you're an artist, they tell you about all of the artists that they know who do work like you, and then they tell you about all the opportunities that they think might be good for you. And it's like a really supportive community of artists. Like they're not really trying to compete with each other, they're all trying to work together to make a better arts community.
So if, say there's somebody who's never experienced your work before, would there be one particular piece you'd need them to see, or you'd want them to see?
This is probably the most ambitious woodcut I've ever done. So we had these blocks that I was pointing out earlier. So this is made from 3 different wood blocks. And one of them, I printed 3 different colors on the same wood block. So 3 blocks, but one has multiple colors printed off of it. So I end up with like the yellow, the orange, the reddish, the purple, and the green. And then everywhere they overlap, because they're all like transparent colors. So you get this cool overlapping effect with all these different unexpected colors. But this one was like, not only in scale, it's pretty large for a woodcut, but just all the layers and everything was a very ambitious piece for me, and I just loved how it turned out. And this is part of a show, actually. I've been working on a show with a couple other local artists for a gallery in Flint, Buckham Gallery, but this was like sort of for me it was my piece that I think captures the spirit of what my work is, like where my work is going right now.
Yeah. So each of those colors is a separate carving?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
I was so nervous about this print prior to the last layer. The last layer was the green, and you can see it covers quite a bit. Like a lot of the detail is in green, a lot of green all throughout it. And before that layer went on, I thought it looked terrible. I was like, oh, I've put in like weeks worth of work and all the colors are not layering how I want them to layer. Nothing is in the place I want it to be. But I was like, okay, I planned for this. I know that the green layer is going to change everything and make it better. And it did. So that was very satisfying.
Yeah, brought it all together.
Yeah.
Be sure to find us on YouTube and Instagram. Exclusive videos, extended content, and behind-the-scenes pictures. Just search Kalamazoo Lively Arts.